Good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Sorghum-ID to invite me to participate to this roundtable and to represent the seed industry here. So my name is Christophe Rouillard. I'm the technical manager for plant health and seed trade matters within the Secretariat of the European Seed Association. Maybe some few words about the European Seed Association. So our association represents the voice of the European seed industry. We represent the interest of all actors that are active in research, in breeding, in production and marketing of seeds of field crops, so including the sorghum seeds, but we are also dealing with vegetable species and seed potatoes. And yeah, just to mention also about myself, I'm really honored also to sit in front of you today as the vice president of Sorghum-ID Association and to represent in the board of Sorghum-ID the seed industry there, together with Arnaud who represents the feed industry and who sits also as vice president. Coming back to our organization, the European Seed Association, and to speak about that association. So we have more than 35 national seed associations as members, and therefore those national seed associations are from EU member states, but also beyond the EU borders, and they represent several thousand businesses, seed businesses in Europe. We have also more than 70 direct company members, including those who are from seed-related activities. About our missions in ESA, in the European Seed Association, it's really to engage on behalf of our members with all the relevant European decision makers in order to represent their interests and to contribute to some missions. The first one is to really contribute to a fair and proportionate regulation of the European seed sector. The second mission that we have is to contribute to a freedom of choice for customers. So I mean the farmers, the growers, the industry and the consumers in supplying seeds as a result of innovative, diverse technologies and production methods. And the third mission, of course, of our association is to contribute of the implementation of a real effective protection of the intellectual property rights relating to plants and seeds in Europe. But that has been said, just coming back to our subject and speaking about sorghum and innovation. So in regard of breeding activities in sorghum in Europe by private companies, so I must say that I'm glad to see today that a full room of participants with more than 180 participants to that second European Congress for sorghum. But I must admit that there are few actors, few breeding companies in Europe dealing with breeding in sorghum. Those breeding companies do not breed only sorghum, but they have a much more larger portfolio than sorghum. They are also mainly active in maize or other field crops, and sorghum for them is still a small part of their activities. Those breeding companies have headquarters and research facilities mainly in Western Europe, so in France, in Italy, in Germany. But we saw also from the posters outside of the room and from the presentation that were given yesterday that there are also some breeding activities and breeding programs in Hungary, in the Netherlands. So that's good also to mention that. Nevertheless, even if those breeding activities are located mainly in Western Europe, they are developing sorghum hybrids that are adapted to the production of sorghum where there is a demand in sorghum, so in France, in Italy, in Spain, in Germany, but also in Central and Eastern European countries, so Czech Republic, Austria, Hungary, and Ukraine. So those companies have also testing facilities and trials over there to really develop varieties that are adapted to those territories.
I'm just curious, are there companies that do research on sorghum in Europe and in Australia, for example, at the same time? Are they exchanging information, or are they settling in several continents?
Yeah,
I should ask them directly, probably.
On minor crops, yes, for sure, there are collaboration between different partners, and collaboration is really needed for those
or maybe
minor
it's
crops
more public
sorghum.
Research then.
So it could be a public and private partnership, but it could be also collaboration between seed companies, and those collaboration can take place into Europe, but also with partners outside of Europe. So yeah, there is some collaboration in seed companies with breeding companies or research institutes outside of Europe to breed on sorghum. And we see that, but I will talk to that a bit later in my presentation, but we see that there are also some US genetics that are present in Europe through the common catalog. Yeah.
The mic closer to you.
Okay, sorry. To speak about innovation in sorghum, also maybe to remind you about the different outlets of sorghum and what our breeders do as breeding targets. So they breed sorghum, grain sorghum for animal feed, but they do also breed single cut fodder sorghum for silage and dual purposes. So I mean animal feed as silage, but also industrial use as biofuels or biogas. There are also some breeding programs on the multi-cut fodder sorghum. So by that I mean the Sudan grass or the hybrids resulting from the crossing from sorghum bicolor by Sudan grass, and that's for animal feed as silage, for example. So yeah, mainly the market in Europe for sorghum, as you know, is on the feed industry, the animal feeds. In Europe, so sorghum is known as a mean to provide for animal feed, but we see that there might be some new opportunities for food consumptions. We saw that throughout the diverse presentations dealing with this on the food use of sorghum, and of course I'm sure you remember also of last evening, and I'm sure that you appreciated the tasting of sorghum beers. So that's for sure a market opportunity. So it's still as a small scale, but there are market opportunities for food use maybe in the future to develop that crop. To give you some figures, some data maybe about the innovation in sorghum in Europe. So the first figure we can mention is about the number of varieties that are registered in the common catalog, in the European catalog. So today we have more than 300 varieties that are registered, so meaning that they are potentially marketable into the European Union. And over those 300 varieties, 95% of them are hybrids. So that's really the major part of the sorghum varieties that are marketed in Europe. To go more into the details of innovation.
Sorry, just a question. In Australia, is it also 95% hybrids or more or less? About the same?
More than 95%, yeah. So basically 100% hybrids. So you said 300 varieties?
Yeah, 300 varieties potentially marketable, but for sure in practice there are far less varieties that are really produced and developed to farmers.
Yeah, so I think we would be lucky to have 20 varieties for 600,000 hectares. So.
Yeah, maybe a bit more than 20 varieties, because every year in Europe there are, I think, something like 15 or 20 new varieties that are registered and that are listed in the European Common Catalogue. So we see that there are some improved genetics each year coming into the European market on that, and we can also give that figure that these new varieties on the Common Catalogue means an increase of 1% of yield improvement each year for sorghum. So we really see that there is some improvement in genetics in Europe on
So 1% yield increase per year, is it what you observe in Australia?
I explained in my talk, it's difficult to separate genetic yield increase from other things as well, but our experience would be that 1% plus would be definitely what we're seeing. So I think the opportunity is to do much better than we have. But it's interesting that I think for the market size, the number of new varieties is very large, and potentially as it becomes more of a stable crop, I would expect that you would not see that increase in new varieties every year.
Okay.
Just to come back maybe, but we mentioned that before with the other speakers yesterday and today about the characteristics, the traits that are selected in breeding in sorghum. So for sure the first target, the first traits is on yield and the stability of yield, but breeders do also work on early growth as well as tolerance of low temperature during the emergence and the flowering stages. They do work also on drought resistance, on lodging resistance, as well as the stay green character. They start to work on disease resistance and predator resistance linked to the emergence of new pests in relation to the climate change issues that we will face now. Speaking about grain sorghum and the quality of grains, so they do breed on the low tannin content, on the grain color, on the texture of the grain, on the starch content, on the health quality of the grain in general.
Why would the color of grains matter?
The color is a matter for some niche market. For example, the white grain for the bird food market is really important, and therefore there is some breeding activities to select on the colors for that purposes. Speaking about the forage grain, so they work more on traits like digestibility and food value, or the BMR character, the sugar content. So that's more or less the characteristics that are selected by breeders on breeding programs. Maybe just to focus a bit more about tannin. Frédéric Gage before focused on that, but I would try to also address that message if there are some people from the feed industry in the room. So be sure that European sorghum is free of tannin, and you know that tannins are considered as an anti-nutritional factor, but thanks to the breeders and to the efforts made by breeders, all the European sorghum varieties today are tannin-free, and this is true for more than 20 years. Frédéric said 89, but I think it's even 30 years that all the varieties in Europe are tannin-free.
So that's probably a good argument for potential exports to China, right?
Yes, that's true.
Going back to yesterday's discussion.
Yeah. And this character applies to all varieties of sorghum, meaningless the color of the grain. We are speaking about the white grain and the red grain, but even the red grain in Europe varieties are tannin-free, so that's something I would like to deliver as a message for the feed industry today.